Welcome to Crossroads. A so-called meat cartel is being blamed for the high cost of meat in the United States, and the Trump administration is looking now to break up this meat cartel. Also, on another topic, Europe is weighing the possibility of mass deportations. They're gonna do it, maybe. Among the latest countries on this front is Germany, no longer Germanistan. Also, meanwhile, the CCP may be undermining American nuclear deterrence with land purchases right by key military bases. And also, Antifa recently tried and then failed to stop a Turning Point event at UC Berkeley. We're talking about all these topics and a lot more today. So don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's get started. And first of all, there's a cartel, not the drug cartel, the meat cartel. And apparently they're the cause of the high cost of meat in the United States. If you want to buy a delicious, wonderful steak, and you look at that price tag and you say, I cannot afford this wonderful, delicious steak, blame the cartel. And President Donald Trump has now issued a directive titled to strip this so-called cartel of all of its power, to break its monopoly on the whole meat industry. And here's what they said, right? It's the official White House announcement. It says, today, President Donald J. Trump directed the Department of Justice. This isn't like some farming initiative. This is the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to launch an investigation into the nation's largest meatpacking companies for potential collusion, price fixing, and price manipulation. An actual cartel by definition, in other words. They've been colluding and creating a cartel. That's the allegation, right? It says this decisive action targets the foreign-dominated conglomerates. By the way, which foreign countries are those? China and Brazil. They control basically the meat processing in America. I don't know why they did it, but America allowed the Chinese Communist Party to buy up some of the largest meat processors in the country. And they've apparently formed an international cartel using this. That's the allegation, at least, right? But it says this. This decisive action targets the foreign-dominated conglomerates that control America's meat supply and have been accused of artificially inflating prices at the expense of farmers, ranchers, and working families. I would add one thing to this. All of you, let's go back to COVID-19, the lockdowns, you're locked in your home, people are protesting outside because, the virus doesn't attack if you're protesting for racial rights, but does if you just want to go buy groceries, right? So if you were rioting and burning down buildings, you didn't have to worry about COVID-19, you were allowed to go out, but everybody else had to lock themselves in their houses because the virus would kill you. You might remember what also happened during that time, right? They said that there was going to be a meat crisis, a food crisis. They were saying there's not enough meat for Americans. An investigation showed, and it was actually Nancy Pelosi called it out. She actually wrote a letter asking the companies about this. While the meat companies were telling Americans there's not enough meat for you, they were making record exports to China. So how does that work? Not enough meat for Americans, but they're making record exports to China? What was happening with that? Maybe that should be investigated, because guess what? We never found out why. Donald Trump, again, designated the meatpacking companies, the processing facilities, as essential services, basically like core things, forced them back to work. The big corporate media said that Trump was going to lead them all to their deaths by forcing them to work. But remember, burning down buildings and rioting was not considered a bad thing by these same media, but that's another story. But I do think they should get answers on what those companies were doing. Was it Chinese involvement? Was it CCP influence? Why were they making record exports to China while telling Americans there's not enough meat for you? Good question, right? But back to this. It says this, White House. They say, here's what you need to know. For too long, a handful of giant meat packers have squeezed America's cattle producers, shrunk herds, and jacked up prices at the grocery stores. I've been told this actually by ranchers. If you go and you look at, wow, why is meat so expensive? Why are we talking about buying meat from Argentina right now? You've seen that, right? Why are we talking about buying meat from Argentina? The reality is this, told to me by ranchers. In fact, on this show, we've done interviews on this. There's not a shortage of cattle in the United States. There's not a shortage of people wanting to, raise herds and so on in the United States. There's a shortage of meat processors in the United States, and artificial caps placed on the industry and alleged collusion within the industry that forces ranchers to cull their herds, reduce it because they can't process it, because there's a monopoly on the processing side. You have this huge industry being squeezed through a very tiny funnel, and that very tiny funnel is what's racking up the prices. That very tiny funnel is squeezing the entire bottom part of the industry. That little tiny funnel has a monopoly. That little tiny funnel is the reason meat costs so much in America. And it's a fair question to ask, who's doing it? Who's behind it? Who's creating it? And are they working together? Fair question. The Trump administration says this: by examining whether these companies have violated antitrust laws, again, working as a cartel allegedly, through coordinated pricing or capacity restrictions, again, affecting the ranchers, they say this investigation will root out any illegal collusion, restore fair competition, and protect our food security. The big controversy and big conspiracy against meat. And it notes this because, as I mentioned, there's 4 companies that control it, mostly Brazilian and Chinese. It says, quote, the big 4 meat packers, JBS, Brazil, Cargill, Tyson Foods, which is China, and National Beef, currently dominate 85% of the U.S. beef processing market, up from just 36% in 1980. 2 of these companies, including the largest meat packer in the world, are either foreign-owned or have significant foreign ownership and control. They're either totally owned or mostly owned by foreign countries. Again, China, Brazil, mainly. And notes that industry consolidation has crushed competition and hammered cattle producers. In the 1980s, the top 4 packers purchased 1/3 of all fed cattle. By the mid-1990s, that share exploded over 80% and has only grown more concentrated since. It says this has led to the exploitation of the American consumers, farmers, and ranchers. Again, that tiny little funnel that the entire industry is being squeezed by. This is strangling the ranchers, this is strangling the farmers, and it's strangling the buyers, and somebody's getting rich off it, and it isn't them, and it isn't you. It says this: in fact, mounting evidence shows this monopoly power has slashed payments to ranchers, reduced herd sizes, driven up consumer prices, and threatened America's food supply chain. And you don't go after America's meat because we love meat in this country. Now, meanwhile, on another topic, Europe is weighing the possibility of mass deportations. And among the latest countries on this front is Germany. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just a pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, 2 precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. Europe is weighing the possibility of mass deportations. They're saying, look, a lot of you came here because of war-torn problems and so on. You're fleeing the war in Syria and otherwise, but the war's over. When are you guys going to go home? Among the latest countries on this front is Germany. Front Page Magazine says this: the Syrian civil war between Sunni and Shiite jihadists allowed millions of Muslim migrants, most of them not even actually Syrian, to swamp Europe, America, and other Western nations, followed by a surge in crime, violence, fraud, terrorism, mass sexual assaults, like the ones suffered by Germany on the infamous New Year's Eve. It notes that now Germany's Chancellor, Merz, is talking about sending them home. And here's what Merz says earlier this week, quote, "The civil war in Syria is over. There are now no longer any grounds for asylum in Germany, which means we can begin repatriating people." Because if you remember what started the whole mass migration to Europe, Syrian civil war, migrant campaigns, everybody heading to Western Europe. They bypass all the countries that do not offer welfare and then go to the countries that do. And then, Germany, the UK, France, a lot of the Nordic countries, become flooded with these people. And then a lot of other people said, well, hey, doors open, let's hop on a boat and go there as well. And a lot of organizations and NGOs were facilitating this. In fact, little to Europe's knowledge, there is in fact a massive United Nations campaign where the leaders of these countries agreed to it, called the Global Compact for Migration. They actually agreed to it and they're signed on with it. They just haven't told their civilians this. But what this has led to is the mass flooding of many of these countries with third world immigrants. And these third world immigrants have not assimilated, let's say. But they say this: deporting the 1.2 million Syrian Muslim migrant invaders would be challenging, but urgently needed, they say, since estimates are that Syrian migrants have committed over 100,000 crimes in just 2024. It's a lot of crime. It's a lot of crime. What are they going to do about it? Well, the problem Germany is going to have is that you can tell people, okay, time to go home. And they're going to say, I don't think I want to go home. And then Germany is going to have to put on their unhappy pants or just keep them there. We'll have to see what they do. There are actually other pushes in other parts of Europe to deal with this, though. In fact, there are groups pushing for mass deportations in the United Kingdom. There are pushes for this in Denmark. Some of the Nordic countries are pushing for it. France is talking about it. The big problem you have in Europe is the way that politics is set up. You can elect a party that says they're going to do it, and they win the election, and then they can't consolidate a party, and basically nothing happens. Europe all around has had that. Or you do the other way, which we've seen in many countries in Europe, which is somebody runs for election, and then they all suddenly die. All the candidates just die. No coincidence, just a coincidence. Or you throw them in jail and you call them extremists, or you investigate them. Also a very common trend we're seeing throughout Western Europe. And so there are other ways to stop, these policies from being enacted, which we've seen happen in most of Europe now. On that front, though, there are big pushes for this, to have mass deportations. And again, the challenge they have is at this point, you have a lot of people who've moved to these countries, they've had kids, the kids are citizens of those countries now. It's rooted. And of course, the local population, the natives, let's say, they have not been reproducing at the same levels. And so their countries are slowly being changed. Because of mass migration. So the question they have is, can they actually do this? Can they deport people? Could they strip children of their citizenship even? How would that work? Because there are people talking about it. Would that be possible? Would it be the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? Another thing you see being done in some countries, Denmark and Germany also, they're talking about cultural assimilation policies. It's a bit hard to do. But they're basically saying if you want to migrate to these countries, you need to learn the language, you need to learn the culture, you need to actually adopt their culture, and you're not just going to come in and bring your way of life from a third world country and bring the third world to Western Europe. Because, of course, that has been what is happening in some countries. You have people coming from other countries, and they're basically bringing foreign law, they're bringing foreign ways of life, and they're completely altering the culture and the nature of these countries. That's actually very hard to do, cultural assimilation. Germany is actually talking about it. What's actually interesting also, though, is even the United States is now discussing this. Have you learned to speak English? Are you on welfare? Are you bringing the third world here, or are you bringing success here? And if you've been living in the United States and you have not bothered to conform to society here at all, they might deport you. America's even reviewing now all the visas, everybody who has a visa. They're also putting different policies in place to say, well, again, have you been living off of any form of welfare? Is there a chance you could live off welfare in the future? They might also deport you. And so America's kind of looking at this as well, which is interesting because it's a very big shift from the previous policies. Cultural assimilation. Are you assimilating to the culture of the country you've moved to? Now, look, on this front as well, Europe is also facing a lot of other problems, huge spikes in crime, problems of terrorism, demographic shifts, rape gangs. Europe has had huge upticks in this, and also the concerns they have of just the national unity being undermined. Europe is actually a lot different than the United States in this front. America does actually have a pretty good mix of people of different cultures and religions and races. Europe does not. And you can move to France and say you're French, but they might say, no, monsieur, you are not French. You will never be French. Because, for them, race and national identity tend to be more closely tied, as opposed to here in the United States, where you get mutts like me who are a bit of everything, and you can call yourself an American. All right, that's another topic. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party may be undermining American nuclear deterrence by buying land right by key facilities where they can monitor everything. The Daily Caller had a great investigative article on this. Here's what they said. They say the top secret June 2025 B-2 bomber strike on Iran's nuclear facilities was launched from Whiteman Air Force Base, which shares a fence with a foreign-owned trailer park linked to a convicted fraudster with Chinese Communist Party intelligence ties. Let that sink in. You build a massive nuclear deterrence. You build this like high-tech, secret stealth airplanes, nothing can find it, secretly launched in the dead of the night, and your adversary has a guy who's a convicted fraudster, has open ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and he undermines your entire nuclear deterrence by literally buying a trailer park located next door. I don't know if this is funny or insulting. I can't decide which this is. But here's what it says. The Knob Noster Trailer Park in rural Missouri is located less than a mile from the runway of the world's only nuclear-capable stealth bomber. Wonderful. It says this: business filings and social media posts reveal the RV park is one of several properties near U.S. military interests acquired by a web of shell companies, which are ultimately owned by a couple who live in Canada and belong to organizations controlled by disgraced Chinese tycoon and self-described former CCP intelligence affiliate Miles Guo. The New Yorker wrote in a 2022 profile. Now, I'll add on this, I didn't realize they're talking about Miles Guo. Miles Guo was anti-CCP. It is kind of complicated because he was actually sent to the United States as part of kind of an intelligence operation and then turned against it. There's a very large anti-CCP base in the United States that follows Guo. He's very anti-CCP. So does this technically represent a threat? I don't know. But it does raise some concerns that, again, there might be, again, former CCP intelligence affiliates with this. But it says this. It says, Guo did not respond to multiple requests for comment. It says the Knob Lobster Trailer Parks manager declined to comment and says the company's purchases raise serious national security concerns and must be investigated by federal authorities. It says State Armor, a nonprofit focused on countering the CCP. And notes as well that State Armor provided information to the Daily Caller News Foundation for use in its investigation. So is this a case of, again, anti-CCP individual having ownership here in the United States? Or is it, again, the issue of a former Chinese intelligence officer who has talked about this openly, having land purchases? I don't know. Maybe there'll be further investigations on it. But what I think is interesting about this is a pattern. We've actually seen a big issue in the United States where Chinese individuals are able to purchase land right next to key facilities. You've heard about the American farmland being bought up by Chinese purchasers right next to U.S. military bases. I've actually carried out investigations on this, and it's kind of crazy. This is what farmers are saying. You have farmers saying, because some people would challenge this, well, Josh, it's not a lot of land. Technically, Chinese-owned farmland in the United States represents less than 1% of foreign-owned farmland in this country. In fact, Canada owns more American farmland than Chinese. Now, there's a technicality of national origin and race. You can have, for example, a Chinese individual who is a Canadian citizen buying American farmland. Do you then count that statistically as Chinese-owned farmland or Canadian? You can have people who have foreign ties tied in with the CCP in another country, Chinese nationals who are, again, citizens or dual citizens of that country buying American farmland. Which country do you count it as? There's a big problem with that, right? Canada, for some reason, has tended to be kind of one of the big jump points of Chinese Communist Party intelligence operations on a lot of fronts, including tied in with the drug trade, by the way. The other issue, though, is that the amount of land is not what's important. The strategic location of the land is what matters, because this is what farmers have actually told me through on-the-ground investigations and in-person interviews. What I have actually been told is this. American farmers are getting approached by Chinese individuals with suitcases of money, offering them cash. And they're saying, hey, I don't want to buy all of your farmland. I want to buy 1 acre of your farm right next to this key, U.S. military facility, right next to this key waterway that is, part of the essential like water supply for this region. I want to buy this one little, tiny acre of your farmland right next to this bridge that would notably be a key target in the event of a war. And they're doing things like that. They're buying one part of farmland right next to key American military bases, key assets, critical infrastructure, and things of that sort. And like the farmers will normally be like, well, what are you going to do with that? That's like a service area. There's no value to it. And it's kind of like, don't ask, don't tell. Here's the cash. Do you want it or not? And a lot of farmers are taking it. So that's what's really going on with Chinese purchases of American farmland. It's being done on small scale, but large scale, but in small purchases. And also right next to really sensitive areas. That's the real story of it. Now, look, on that point also, the Chinese Communist Party is backtracking on key parts of a recent trade deal with President Donald Trump. Interesting because, look, Trump saying, hey, Xi Jinping, let's make a trade deal. As I mentioned, the Chinese Communist Party will sign a deal and then violate it because that's how they work. You call it the China model. That's how they always do it. They have made kind of a subtle agreement. I've noted the agreement that Trump made with Xi Jinping does not represent an end to the trade war. It kind of sets terms for the war that is to come. It basically says Donald Trump is going, I'm not going to hit you with 100% tariffs, but we need you to not cut off the supply of certain rare earth minerals while we build up alternative sources of these. The Chinese Communist Party agreed to it. they've now thrown that to the gutter, and they're cutting off these key minerals to the United States. Epoch Times said this. It says the Chinese regime has temporarily lifted a ban on exports of several minerals needed for producing advanced semiconductors and military equipment to the United States, and suspended its latest export curbs on rare earth materials as part of a tentative trade truce reached last month. It says Beijing paused restrictions on the sale of gallium, germanium, antimony, and so-called super hard materials to the United States, according to a statement released by the regime's Ministry of Commerce on November 9th. It says the suspension took effect immediately and will only run through November 27th, 2026, the ministry said. In other words, this is not permanent. This is a temporary truce in the middle of a trade war. A temporary truce that gives each side time to prepare itself so that their economies do not collapse and wartime manufacturing does not collapse for 1 year. That is the important thing here. This is not a deal that's going to be the end-all be-all. This is a 1-year agreement that will allow the countries to build things in the meantime. It says the ministry also halted the strict review process for exporting graphite to the United States, as well as a ban on transferring items of both civilian and military applications to U.S. entities, rules that were introduced alongside the export ban last December, according to the statement. And we'll see what happens on this front too, because the CCP is also saying, hey, maybe we'll stop fentanyl. The reality is they're exporting car fentanyl now. They're exporting drugs by other names. And they're, of course, also now openly doing things with South America, Venezuela, that could actually facilitate some of the wartime efforts against the United States, providing them with assets, let's say, to challenge United States operations in that region. Also, look, speaking of communists, Antifa, the American communists, they've recently tried and failed to stop a Turning Point event at UC Berkeley. Let me show you this. Fox News said this. A bloody fight broke out near the University of California, Berkeley on Monday afternoon ahead of a Turning Point USA event on campus. It says the event, which featured Dr. Frank Turek and Rob Schneider, marked the end of the This is the Turning Point tour. Interesting because guess what, folks? Tomorrow, actually in California, I'm going to be speaking at an event with Rob Schneider. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, please do. We're holding a big fundraiser actually in Orange County. I'll be speaking alongside Rob Schneider with that. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, be sure to do it. That's going to be in our Orange County, through our Orange County office for Epoch Times. But back to what happened where Rob Schneider had to face off with Antifa. It says it took place just 2 months after TPUSA's founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated at a campus event in Utah on September 10th. It says the confrontation erupted around 4:30 Pacific time. It says during the brawl, 2 men were seen fighting each other, one of whom had blood gushing from his face. It notes as well. Video taken by Fox News Digital also shows a crowd of agitators gathering around the fight. Many demonstrators wore keffiyehs, and it said, which are like the Islamist things, and carried signs with left-wing messages. It notes that local police had difficulty containing the agitators and were seen putting on shield masks and gathering batons. In other words, preparing for a riot. It notes it is unknown how many participants were injured, because maybe nobody is counting. Now, on that front, President Donald Trump is working to designate Antifa a transnational terrorist organization, meaning not just an American terrorist organization, but an international one. People on the other side say, well, how do you make terrorism an idea? How do you designate that when it's not a real organization? Well, it's an organization if you have operations, materials, training, funding, basis of operation, organization, systems, and even like legal representation, quote-unquote media representation where they get cameras and then try to use the protections journalists get in order to carry out their operations and otherwise. The simple answer is this. Terrorism is also an idea. In fact, a lot of it is lone wolf terrorism, but we still call lone wolf terrorists terrorists. A lone wolf terrorist can still be called a terrorist even if they're not part of a broader organization. If a lone wolf terrorist has become self-radicalized and then goes out and conspires to, not even carries out, but conspires to carry out a terrorist attack, well, you can arrest them and charge them for terrorism, or even not, and send them off to Guantanamo Bay. Because again, there are certain laws in place that allow for kind of extrajudicial actions if you've been designated a terrorist. And so on the same front, Antifa, although you could argue it is an idea, it is a loosely affiliated string of organizations that does in fact have funding, foreign ties, and other infrastructure. So there are actual institutions for it. If you have individuals who represent the ideas, have the materials, conspire to carry out operations under the name of the ideology or idea, then on the same ground you would go after a terrorist representing a lone wolf brand of it. You could go after Antifa. That's the basis of it. And the media, for some reason, is not telling you this. You very much can designate them a terrorist organization, and you can go after them in the exact same way you'd go after things like the Haqqani Network or ISIS affiliates, right? Because it's not the official organization, but affiliate ideologies and movements, or lone wolf terrorists. It actually works like that. And every media organization telling you otherwise has been lying to you. On another topic, meanwhile, there is yet another attempt at race and gender politics. And this one is targeting podcasts. All right, get this, okay? The Wrap is saying, quote, the hosts of the top 100 podcasts of 2024 were overwhelmingly white and male. A new comprehensive study from USC reveals. It says of the top podcasts, 64% were hosted by, wait for it, were hosted by men. 77% of the hosts, it says, were white. And notice this is underlining a severe lack of diversity in the medium that continues to rise in popularity and has become a cornerstone of viewing time on YouTube. One of the great scandals of our time. Now, like on this point, just being real, right? What is the racial makeup of the United States? What percent is male versus female, or biological male versus female? I don't know, it's roughly 50-something%, right? Roughly half the country. So 64% hosted by men is not a huge disparity. And what causes the disparity of people, again, an industry that's not restricted by you just going and starting something. It's you yourself. It just means a motivation issue. And what is the racial makeup of the United States? I don't know. I think we are a majority white country, so 77% white is not like a disparity, okay? Also on that point, it says this. It says the report titled Inequality in Popular Podcasts was authored by Dr. Stacey L. Smith and the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative based on podcast data from Spotify and additional podcast industry reports. It says the first of its kind study examines the top 100 podcasts of 2024 and a total of 592 popular podcasts. All right, hear me out. So they're looking at the popular podcasts, the top 100, and, you know, even beyond that, the top 592. And they found a disparity that's actually not a huge disparity based on racial makeup or gender makeup. But I'll raise a question. They're looking at the popular ones. All right, what makes a show popular? Right? Pop quiz, right? Let's do Jeopardy. What makes a show popular? People deciding to watch it. What motivates people to watch something? Is it they're forced to? Is there an organization that squeezes them and says you have to sit down tonight and watch this show? Otherwise, I don't know, you're a bad person. What is it that makes people listen to a podcast or watch a YouTube show? Choice. Freedom of choice. That is the answer. So the issue with podcasts is the success of the show is determined simply by whether people choose to listen to it or watch it. And if the audience decides that, right, then what is the real issue here? It's not some overarching agenda. And so the big question is, if they're saying there's a problem with this, how do you change that? Well, you change it. How do you change racial makeup? Well, you can do what a lot of the big corporate media is doing, where you get rid of people of certain races, and you just race swap them and replace them with somebody else. The other issue you have is you have a lot of mixed race people. Like I don't know what I'd be defined as. I don't even know. How do you define people, right? Are they assuming the gender of these individuals? Have they asked them what their pronouns are? That's a fair question to ask. Right? Who's making the choice if these organizations are playing this game? But to be real, I'd actually say this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes something successful or not. You're talking about an industry that is largely unregulated. Podcasts, people deciding to start up YouTube shows, and an industry they've tried to control in many ways by using censorship, restrictions on ad revenue, and otherwise. And again, if you start to try to fix this, quote unquote, by manipulating the system, the only way you can do it is through racial discrimination or gender discrimination. Well, you're a man, so we're going to restrict the reach of your show. Well, you are white, you're part of the wrong race, and so we're going to restrict the reach of your show. And then, hey, you're part of the right race, we're going to increase the reach of your show. If you try to, quote unquote, fix this thing by creating equity based on race and gender, you will in fact be engaging in racial discrimination and gender discrimination. The real irony of these policies, the people doing this are the racists. The people trying to mess with the system are the racists and the sexists. The people doing studies like this, using gender discrimination to try to claim there's a problem, are in fact the ones guilty of what they accuse others of doing. And so again, if they want to manipulate something, if they want to create something successful, all you need to do is encourage people to try to build something and to become successful, not to manipulate the system to artificially create success or failure, which is what many of these people have in fact been doing, these big organizations for the past 4 years, and it has not worked. Now, like also, speaking of not being able to force people to choose what they watch, the legacy media is not doing so well. And they're actually now looking to change their identities. The legacy media is now going to identify as successful. Okay? Does that mean they're successful? We'll wait and see. The Hollywood Reporter says this. It says the media business is in the midst of a rebranding revolution. It says from Wall Street facing corporate trade names to consumer facing channels and streaming services, the disruption rippling across these sectors seems to be causing executives to rethink or reinforce what their brand, and executives running those businesses have no choice but to adapt and make the best of it. It says in the last few weeks, a couple of the country's largest publishers changed their names from Gannett to USA Today's Inc., and it says Dotdash and Meredith to People's Inc., taking on their names of their most prominent media brand. It says ESPN and CNN launched a new consumer-facing streaming service called ESPN and CNN, while Apple TV decided to drop the plus from its own service in the name of simplicity. In other words, they're all rebranding themselves. They're being like, hey, everything we're doing isn't working. People are not watching us. All the racists and sexists are watching those dang racist podcasts and YouTube shows and not us. How do we change this? Well, it's obviously being caused by something other than our bad content that nobody wants to watch, and so they're finding other ways to do it. Now look, we'll see how this goes. Will changing their identities fix the problem, Or is it the content of their shows that is the problem? If you were to ask me, changing a name without changing the content, it's a lot like changing your pronouns. It's what's inside that really makes a difference, okay? Changing your identity does not change what you are. And that is the reality that many of these organizations will soon encounter, but we'll have to wait and see. Because maybe if they change their names, look, okay, hear me out. How many of you know a person who has stopped watching a major network news program? How many of you know a person who's done this? Have you stopped watching a major network news program? What caused you to stop watching that major network news program? What was it that caused you to stop watching them? Now, if that major network news program were to change its name and do nothing to change their content, but they changed the name, would you go back and watch it again? You're like, well, it's a different name. It must be a different show. Would you go back and watch it? Tell me. Let me know. Based on this quick study we've done, do you think this is going to work for them? You tell me. All right, that said, our new documentary, Truth Under Fire, The Framing of Charlie Kirk. I've been hard at work on this. The new documentary comes out November 19th. This is going to be completely free to watch. If you want to see it, all you have to do, register on Epoch TV, epochtv.com. It's been a lot of work putting this together. We interviewed a lot of great people. I really think this is going to have a great impact. The link to watch this new documentary coming out soon is in the description box below. Let me show you a quick trailer of this and we'll jump into some questions, but this is the trailer for it. Let me show you. How was Charlie Kirk framed by the narrative system?
An anti-Semite, as a purveyor of misinformation, as being someone on what they call the hard right.
He's been slandered and lied about by people on the left.
They want to create an atmosphere of fear where I'll stop doing what I'm doing because I'm worried that I'm going to get murdered.
Charlie Kirk was shot down on a college campus, not with a weapon in his hand, but with a microphone.
What kind of threats did Charlie face, and did he ever confide in you about these?
He would say, you know, this is a dark time spiritually, pray for me.
And look, not only do we have this brand new documentary coming out, I will be also hosting a special additional live Q&A on the documentary. This is going to be for the premiere, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on premiere day. That's going to be Wednesday, November 19th, and I will see you all there for this special episode and the release of our documentary. That said, let's jump into some questions. All right. Also, I briefly mentioned I'm actually flying out today for California because I'm going to be speaking at an Epoch Times fundraiser with Rob Schneider. It's going to be me, Rob Schneider, Jan from American Thought Leaders, Roman from Facts Matter, and a few of us. That's going to be tomorrow. I didn't announce it because I think we might have sold out already, but hopefully I'll see some of you all there. It's going to be a great event, and I'm going to be doing more of these. Some of which I will be announcing sooner. So probably every couple months I'll be doing a fundraiser like this. Epoch Times, of course, we're a nonprofit, we're a 501c3, and a lot of the work we do, supported by subscribers like yourself, but also supported by donations. So it's all of you who would let us do this kind of work. It's all of you watching the show who let me go out and travel around and do investigations. But let me put together great documentaries, and actually I wanted to say also I'm going to keep doing it because I've been talking with some of my editors, and I'm going to get back on it. I think I've been we haven't done a big documentary in a while. I'm going to start making this a regular thing again. I have some great content in the works, and so you'll be seeing me on the road quite a bit. But again, we'll keep the show going while I'm on the road, as I usually do. First question, Enthos32, you're saying foreign-dominated conglomerates What could possibly go wrong? Americans deserve thoughtfulness to their national security. Make America make sense again. Yeah, it's crazy, actually. You know, it is a problem in the United States. So, look, I talk to a lot of libertarians about this. It's fair to say, if you were to break down my political viewpoints, you know, I'm probably a bit more I don't like to define myself. I'm probably a bit more libertarian. Why is that? I have values I hold myself to. I don't care if other people abide by my values. I enjoy freedom. Freedom means I respect the freedom of others, okay? If I believe in freedom of speech, it means that I'm willing to hear speech that I find annoying. If I believe in freedom of belief, it means I want to have my beliefs, and I will let you believe what you want, no matter what it is. As long as you're not hurting people, I don't care. You can make the craziest belief in the world, and I will fight by your side to defend your right to believe it. I will be your bro, fighting to believe what you want. Because for me, every belief sounds far out to the people who don't believe it. That's the nature of belief, and I think this is a basic human right. But when I talk to guys who are more libertarian, sometimes I find, you know, they're free market absolutists. And they say, for example, because, you know, of course, I'm very critical of like the Chinese, I'm very critical of communism, okay, in case you haven't noticed. And so when we do like trade deals with the CCP, and I'm like, why are we letting this happen? They're like, well, free market, Josh, don't you like the free market? I'm like, yeah, I like the free market when it's not being used to undermine the free market. If the American government or American businesses lobby and restrict the rights of Americans by using corporations in American industry, if the American government were to force Hollywood to censor itself, if the American government were to force media to censor themselves, if the American government were to punish the NBA for talking about human rights, I would have a problem with it because I believe in these basic rights. And so, I would say most libertarians would agree with me. That is wrong. So why is it that when the Chinese Communist Party threatens American media to censor or says, hey, you're going to lose your visas or lose major business because the American media, for the most part, is controlled by like 6 corporations, and the parent corporations don't want to lose their financial interest in China, and so they restrict our media. So it's okay if a foreign government restricts the rights of Americans by manipulating the markets through state interventionism, but it's wrong if the American government does it, and we can not agree on this. The American government can't force people who make films or, you know, Hollywood producers to, you know, do something or not, for the most part, right? We have a lot of protection. Some say maybe too much protection. We have a lot of protections on that. But the Chinese Communist Party can use financial interest and squeezes on the market. They can buy up the talent houses. They can buy up American movie theater chains, which they have done. They can force Hollywood producers to co-produce their movies with the Chinese Communist Party and create foreign government, not even business, foreign government ties to Hollywood that forces censorship and forces American films to abide by laws on Chinese, what they call socialism, right? You should represent socialism, or Xi Jinping thought. They can do that. Okay, so hear me out. We can all agree that it's wrong for our government to do this to American creativity in films. So why can't we agree that it's wrong for a foreign government to do it? Because some people say, well, free market. If a foreign government is undermining the free market in the United States, is that not also a problem? And so if we want to talk about free market capitalism and free trade, is it still free market capitalism if we, fine, we don't have our government do it, but is it still a free market if we let foreign governments do it? Like Enes Kanter Freedom being punished by the NBA for criticizing slave labor in Xinjiang in China, while the guy next to him is kneeling on the court criticizing America for, slavery in the 1800s, and he's allowed to do it, but a guy criticizing current day slavery gets punished? What is this? Do we have freedom of speech? Do we have freedom of belief? Do we have freedom of expression? No, because it's being restricted by foreign governments influencing business in America. Is that still a free market? No, it is not. And so, as somebody who loves the free market, who thinks it's one of the greatest things and creates the greatest wealth, and people of my generation say, well, no, it's not the case, I would say the problem we have is that we don't actually have it. The free market is being restricted. The free market is being strangled. The free market is being censored. The basic rights of Americans are being undermined by enemies, foreign and domestic. And that is the reality of it. And so, as Enthos 32 says, foreign-dominated conglomerates, again, forming monopolies in the United States, squeezing our own industries, raising prices for our goods, raising prices for our services, restricting basic constitutional rights, and doing it in the name of foreign interest. Is this still America, frankly? Is this still America? Or are we letting ourselves be conquered through non-military means by foreign interest, when adversaries like the Chinese Communist Party openly state this? In fact, the United Front is designed for this. It's what you call leadership capture. If the Chinese unrestricted warfare doctrine is talking about using business warfare, they call it that, legal warfare, manipulation of legal systems, and economic warfare to wage war against us, drug warfare and other things. Is that still free market capitalism? The answer is no. Because it's not free market capitalism if the free market has been undermined by foreign conglomerates. That is a simple answer. And if we allow them to buy things here, form cartels, abide by foreign law, and then use foreign law, foreign interest, and foreign collusion to squeeze us using monopoly purchases, to eliminate competition, and then to institute their laws sometimes, do we still live in a free market country? Do we still live under the protections of American law? The simple answer is no. No, we do not. Because foreign interest is restricting basic American rights, foreign interest and foreign law, because the companies have to abide by foreign law when they have foreign holdings, foreign law enforced by them impacting us. Are we living under American law or Chinese law? The simple answer is if they have monopolies, then we're living under Chinese law within those monopolies. That is the answer. And this is what they call conquering the civil society to conquer the country. Conquering the systems that form the basis of society. And by conquering those, creating puppet states. The CCP openly does this. That's what they call the United Front. They openly do this. And we're going to watch ourselves be conquered through non-military means unless we do something about this. And so it's good the Trump administration is doing something about it, at least on the meat front. I hope they do it for everything. Because foreign cartels squeezing us and farmers and ranchers to the meat industry and squeezing prices, it's bigger than that. In fact, I'd say it's most of the major industries. I hope they go after the media next, because a lot of major news organizations are just licking the boots, sucking the toes of the Chinese Communist Party. They don't need boot polish because the bootlickers are hard at work. And so I hope they go after them too one day, because there's a lot of sellouts. There's a lot of sellouts. Not even just the CCP, a lot of sellouts for foreign interest in general. You'd be shocked by how many people have sold out basic interest to foreign influence. Rob Schlosser, you're saying, when it comes to decisions from the government, if it doesn't make sense, it makes dollars and cents. I see what you did there. I like that. When it comes to the decisions of government, if it doesn't make sense, it makes dollars and cents. You're basically saying that, look, if it's nonsensical, there's probably another reason they're doing it. The simple answer is probably financial interest. I can tell you, as someone who's been a journalist I've been a journalist with Epoch Times since 2006. My 20th anniversary comes up very soon. Within actually just a few months, I will have been a journalist for 20 years. Come the new year, I will have been a journalist for 20 years. And so, as somebody who's been in the industry this long, I've seen it firsthand. There's so much manipulation. There is so much special interest. There's so much just dirty business. There's a lot of that going on. And, part of it is just it's how things work. I'm not living in some like utopian illusion where I like to imagine that everything is all rainbows and puppy dogs. Some are trying to do that. I would say that, the reality of the human world and human history is, look, tell me a single country on the face of the planet and civilization that did not have corruption. Human interest tends to do that, and you're going to have it. I'm not saying we should tolerate it. I'm not saying it should be like, that's just the way it is. But it is part of the reality. There's a lot of special interest that pulls strings. The question is, how much do we allow that to happen, and how much do we actually clamp down on it and call it out? But there is a lot of nonsensical things going on that is being done solely for financial interest. This is very much the reality. And unfortunately, I've seen quite a bit of it, which is, by the way, why I work where I work, because I'd say we're one of the last bastions of decency in this industry. It's wild stuff, right? It's a wild ride. I'm the kind of person where I have people criticizing me, saying that I live in a bubble because I just don't play these kinds of games. And you know what? Good. I hope my bubble grows and we encompass more of the industry, because it needs to be more like this, frankly. Cheers to that, right? Last question, then I have to go catch a flight. Mona Van Voren, you're saying, in Germany, illegals can steal in stores. The employees were instructed to look the other way, but when a German steals anything, the police are called and they are prosecuted. Yeah, the crazy thing is, all right, let's put on our little hats, okay, our little conspiracy hats. Does anybody else notice a pattern here? Okay, let's remove the country. Can you tell me, all right, how about this? In the country in which you live, or the state in which you live, have you seen it where illegals or non-citizens are able to commit crimes and the police cannot really do anything about it? But if citizens, American citizens, foreign citizens, whoever it is, your neighbor, were to do the same thing, you would be arrested. How many of you have noticed this pattern? Well, I have. In New York City, I see it all the time. I see illegal aliens committing crimes all the time that if American citizens were to do, they would be prosecuted. I know this is the case with theft. I know it's the case with scams. I know it's the case with pickpocketing. I've been to Europe, and that's a big problem. I know it's the case with petty crime. I know it's the case with speech. In some countries, you have restrictions on speech, or one religion is able to criticize another, but if you criticize theirs back, you will be prosecuted, but they will not. Racist policies where they can attack your race, but you can't attack theirs. We see this across the board. In other words, double standards. Double standards that protect one side and prosecute the other. This is in fact a broader pattern. We see this being done on, legal status, illegal immigrants versus citizens. We see this being done on partisan standards, where American businesses that are conservative might face out of the past 4 years at least, censorship, pressure, investigations, where on the other side they do not. We've seen it with even, again, just across the board, whether it's race or gender or anything else, that there are double standards. And so the question is, what creates the double standards? And the fair question to ask is, we see this in California, under $900, free to steal. Misdemeanor crime, slap on the wrist. We see this in Chicago. We see this in New York City. We see this in the United Kingdom. We see this in Italy. We see this in France. We see this in Germany. Is there something behind this pattern? Fair question to ask. Let me know what you think in the comments. And of course, I will see you again soon. We'll do that show again tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to join me then. In the meantime, please do not forget to like and share this video. And if you have not yet, don't forget to subscribe. I will see you all tomorrow for another great episode. And that said, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.